Everybody, thank you for joining. We are on the eve of Gimmel Tammuz, the third day of Tammuz, the day that our dear Rebbe physically left this world, but in spirit is ever stronger here, more than ever. The Rebbe's neshama, the Rebbe's impact is greater than ever before. And as we approach Gimmel Tammuz, it's important that we make what we call hachanas for Gimmel Tammuz, preparation for Gimmel Tammuz. As we will learn in a couple of weeks in the Parsha of Balak, okay, so folks, you know what I'm going to ask you now, everybody to put on their cameras here. Sorry. Welcome, Michael. Thank you for joining. All right, give me a moment here. So we will learn in a forthcoming Torah portion about the non-Jewish prophet Balak and his encounters, which he had prophetic vision, was with God, but it didn't come from a holy place. So the term that's used is happened upon. So like, you know, things in life, sometimes they just happen upon you and they don't seem to have a rhyme or reason. They seem to be just, you know, happenstance. So imagine God coming to you as happenstance. Well, you have to be pretty a wicked individual to take an engagement with God as happenstance. That's what he did. So from there we learn that anything that is meaningful in life cannot be happenstance. There has to be a preparation. There has to be some engagement of the individual in order that when they come to that thing that they're engaged in becomes meaningful and not just happenstance. So we're coming to Gimmel Tammuz. It'll be 26 years since the physical passing of our dear Rebbe. And as the Zohar tells us, that a righteous individual, when they pass away, they're actually more relevant, more found, more available than when they were physically alive. And we can see that in the last 26 years since Rebbe's leaving of this physical world, that there are more people connected to his teachings, more people connected to the path that he and the vision that he set than ever before. Why? Because the soul is the major and most important thing about his life. You know, if life is about doing lunch, well, after 120, you don't do lunch anymore. If life is about the next fun time you're going to have in a material manner, well, after 120, you're not going to have that fun material time anymore, whether it's the vacation or whatever, right? But if life is about soulfulness, is about impact, is about making a difference in other people's lives, changing the world for good. Oh, well, that's not a physical thing. That's a thing of the spirit. That spirit of the person lives on and carries forward. Carries forward in one's children, in one's descendants, in one's followers, and so on and so forth. So the Rebbe's impact is no doubt. It's there. My hope is that everybody that's on Facebook watching and everybody that's on Zoom watching is that we will not only appreciate the Rebbe's impact, but want to have a personal connection, and that when it comes to Gimmel Tammuz, this coming Thursday, that you take a moment and write a pidyon nefesh, a letter to the Rebbe. If it's your first time, introduce yourself. If it's not your first time, just say hello and ask for a blessing. Ask for blessings for material things, because it's important we have those material things, because from the material we make spiritual. God gives us material so we could make some things very beautiful and spiritual out of it. So ask, but most importantly, ask. By the asking is making a connection. So I want to take something from this week's Torah portion that dwells on this and brings this idea out, and it's quite a beautiful talk actually from the Rebbe, a sicha. So this week's Torah portion is called Shelach. It's about the spies. I'm sure we're familiar with the story. Jewish people are told that not only are they going out of Egypt, not only are they getting the Torah at Mount Sinai, but you're going into the land of Israel and you're going to conquer it and you're going to dwell in the land, and it's your land and it's your holy land. But the Jewish people weren't so certain, and they wanted to have a certainty. So they came and asked, we want to send spies into the land. And God said, okay, not a problem. Shelach lecha. Moses tells them, you send on your own. It's your commission of you're commissioning these people. You send them. And as we know the story, 10 of the spies came back with I wouldn't say a faulty report, but they didn't come back with what they were told. They were told just to give the information, give the facts. Don't give interpretation of the facts. You weren't asked that. You were just told to give the facts on how you could conquer the land. Well, they came back with an interpretation. Well, we can't conquer the land, actually. They're too mighty for us. They're too powerful for us. And we all know the story. That as a result of that, the Jews had to wander in the desert for 40 years, right? Nomads for 40 years in the desert. Each day of their traveling in the land of 40 days was a punishment for 40 years that they had to dwell in the land. And that entire population of Jews would die out by the age of 60. And that's a very clear story, and we're all familiar with that story, with some of us with greater details, some of us with less details, but we're familiar with the story. But if we take a little closer look, and I'm going to read from a couple of verses. This is after we're told the story, we're already told of the punishment that the Jews will dwell 40 years in the desert. They're not going into the land the same generation. They will die out, and it will be the next generation that will go into the land. But the verse says, and this is in, if anybody would like to look, it's the book of Bamidbar, Numbers, chapter 14, verse 36. But as for the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land, and when they returned, they provoked the entire assembly to complain against him by bringing forth a report against the land. The first verse says. The next verse says, the men who brought forth the evil report about the land died in the plague before Hashem. So the commentators have a real problem with this verse. You know, there isn't a letter in the Torah that's redundant. But this verse 36 seems to be entirely redundant. What do you have to tell us about the men that Moses sent to spy out the land, and when they returned, they provoked the entire assembly to complain against him by bringing forth? We know that. Everything before that was all about that. This whole verse seems to be redundant. Rashi's bothered by this, and what does he say? That when they returned, they provoked the entire assembly to complain against him. And when they returned and spying out the land, they instigated the entire assembly against him. Who's the him? So this is the interesting point over here. It says him. What do you mean him? They against, who's the him? They against him. So one thing we know for certain, the Jewish people, including the spies, lacked faith in God, that God would bring about the conquering of the land of Israel. And they questioned it to begin with, and therefore that's why they wanted the spies to be sent. And indeed, when they came back with their scouting report, they made a conclusion that they are too strong from him, God Almighty. So they lack faith. And as a result of lacking faith, God gets angry, right? What does God want to do? He actually wants to destroy the entire Jewish people and say, Moshe Rabbeinu, this is enough. This is the 10th time already. There's too many times that they are starting up. We'll start a nation from you. I'll keep my word to the patriarchs, saying that they are the descendants of the Jewish people, but it'll be through you. What does Moshe Rabbeinu do? As he always does. The faithful shepherd of the Jewish people. He prays to God and he says, can't do it. And without going into the details of the prayer and the content of it, what is the finale? God does not immediately kill the Jewish people. As a matter of fact, those who were 20 years old had 40 years to live. Those who were 50 years old had another 10 years to live. They continued living a wonderful life with the manna from heaven, with the clouds of glory protecting, and everything that came with the guidance of Hashem in the desert. They continue to have all of that. Of course, not coming into the land, but they continue to have this. Why did they get punished? Because they had a lack of faith, but it wasn't immediate, as God initially said that he would do. But no, Moshe Rabbeinu's prayers helped for them. Commentators have a question. So we have one question. One is a redundancy of our verse 36. Second question is, okay, well, Moshe Rabbeinu. Why did he not pray for the spies themselves? Because what the verse tells us over here, verse 36 and 37, that they died. And according to the simple meaning of the text, they died on that day. Other commentators say they died a bit later, but according to the simple meaning of the text, they died that day. So the question is, why did Moshe Rabbeinu pray for them? This is Rashi's overriding issue on the simple meaning of the text that he is troubled with and gives us a response. So remember in the verse 36, we said that it says that they returned and provoked the entire assembly to complain against him. Who's the him? Not God, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses himself. These 10 spies not only had a lack of faith, but there was something else. Unlike the rest of the Jewish people who only lacked in faith, they openly rebelled against Moshe Rabbeinu. They openly rebelled against him. And this is what the verse is saying, and this is Rashi is saying. Rashi is saying that when they returned from spying out the land, they instigated the entire assembly against him, against Moshe Rabbeinu. And it was these men, therefore, and these men were the ones who were responsible for that. Now, being responsible for instigating against Moshe Rabbeinu, the entire nation, they were the ones who rebelled. This creates a Talmudic principle, brings into play a Talmudic principle. The Talmudic principle is in keteger nasi seneger, that the prosecutor cannot become a defense attorney. Right? If you're the prosecutor in a case in court, you can't now become the defense attorney. They rebelled against Moshe Rabbeinu, right? They became, in a sense, prosecuting him. He cannot be now their defense attorney based on that principle. So the first verse is telling us, they instigated against Moshe Rabbeinu, therefore he couldn't pray for them. He could not be their defender if they were the instigators against him. If it was just against God, like the rest of the people, against God, okay, he could take up their case and plead for them. But since it was against him, he could not. The next verse, it says that they died. For that reason, they wouldn't die immediately. Why did they die immediately? So the next verse comes and says, so they died, and actually because they spoke ill against the land that God had promised them. They spoke ill. In other words, because of their lack of faith in God, because of that, that's why they died immediately. So we have two sins that the 10 spies were engaged in. We have only one sin that the rest of the Jewish people were engaged in. And this is what the two verses are coming to tell us. The first verse is that they rebelled against Moshe Rabbeinu, against him. Therefore, he couldn't pray on their behalf and save them. And therefore, that means the punishment of death. Like everybody else had the punishment of death, but Moshe Rabbeinu was able to pray for them. But in this instance, he couldn't. So therefore, the next verse comes to know, and they died because of their lack of faith in God, and they spoke ill against the land that God had promised them. So what do we have from here is an amazing thing. The power of a righteous person, that he can pray for the people, that even if there's a decree in heaven, that it can be annulled by the prayers of the righteous. That's a powerful idea. The Rebbe in the Sikha continues and says that in every generation there are righteous people, holy people, and that they pray for the Jewish people, and as a result of their prayers, their prayers will help them. Now, I heard an interesting voice note from a teacher of mine from many years ago when I was in yeshiva, and he was responsible for this particular teaching. And when the Rebbe said it in 1972, and he was responsible for putting it together as a talk, as a written. The Rebbe spoke it, and then it was put to paper, pen and paper, and edited, sent into the Rebbe. So they wrote in their notes that therefore someone who goes against a righteous person, that person cannot pray for them. Because that's Moshe Rabbeinu didn't pray for them, right? Moses didn't pray for them. So he said, what do we learn from this as a lesson? The Rebbe X'd it and said no, and X'd that part. In other words, don't make that conclusion. So they thought they didn't write it inappropriately. Maybe it was not the right language. So they wrote it again because it seemed to be an obvious conclusion of what was said. And they wrote it indifferently. And the Rebbe said that, no, this is against everything that Hasidic teachings teach us. Interesting idea. And that is completely, totally against. In other words, even a righteous person who people rebel against, that person can still be prayed for. Even those who go against the righteous. Then why not with Moses? What happened with Moses? How come he didn't do it? So I don't have clarity on that. I'm not certain. It doesn't explain. But what it does explain to us is that as Torah evolves in its understanding, the righteous perhaps become even greater with time, with generations passing. Not that they become lesser, maybe they become even greater. Why do they become greater? Because the needs of the people are greater. In times of Moses, they were what we call a Dordea, a generation of knowledge. They saw miracles of God. We don't see miracles of God, so we need greater and holier people who can lead us and guide us. So perhaps we have even greater people today than ever before. The point being, and as the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya in chapter 2, that the righteous, that all life comes to this world by way of God through righteous people. Through righteous people. So therefore, through them, they're a conduit of bringing life, divinity, goodness into this world. Hence, our connection to them is essential. Because by being connected to them, we gain a life force in a healthy way. Now, the amazing thing is that even those who rebel still get their life force, not in the healthiest way, but still get it. The point being, we are less than a week from Gimmel Tammuz. From the third day of Tammuz, again, as the Rebbe left this physical world, and it's a time for us to connect. It's a time that we can get blessings because he is more available now to give us blessings than ever before. I see in my own life, I see in other people's lives, through that connection of the Rebbe, and writing a letter to the Rebbe to the Oyel, to the Rebbe's resting place, sending it by an email, sending it by fax, is a way to connect and to receive divine blessings for all the things that we need in our lives. So we're going to discuss this more Wednesday night, and Rabbi Mendy Bressinger and I will have a Fabringen, same place over here, Wednesday night, 7:30. We'll have more on it on Thursday on Gimmel Tammuz itself. We'll have 14 hours of nonstop learning going on. Every half hour, a different teacher teaching. And of course, Tuesday night also, when we have also another preparation for Gimmel Tammuz. Point is, we need holy people, righteous people in our lives. Through them, we can more appropriately connect to God and fulfill the reason why God created us. We don't use them as a crutch. We use them as a guide. There's a lot of confusion in the world. There's a lot of darkness in the world. And to be able to have a certainty, how many people have a certainty about their lives, that how crucial, how important their lives are, how important what they're doing at this moment in their life is? Very few. Very few have that certainty. Very few. What do we need? What do we need? A Rebbe that gives us that guidance. So I encourage everybody, please join us for the rest of the week when we'll make more preparations. Get ready to write a pan to the Rebbe on Gimmel Tammuz. And most importantly, have a wonderful, good Shabbos to everybody. I thank everybody that's on Facebook joining us. I thank everybody here that's on Zoom. Wishing you a wonderful, good Shabbos. Be well, everybody.
Good